was and continues to be one of Ontario's hardest hit regions, and one of the main reasons is because many essential workers do not have access to adequate paid sick days. I've seen firsthand that there can be no safe schools without permanent and adequate paid sick days. I've seen firsthand parents unable to follow the advice of public health units to keep their children home from school when sick because this government is forcing them to choose between paying bills and keeping their families safe.
COVID-19 cases are going up in Ontario once again, and frontline healthcare workers are reigniting their calls for paid sick days. They gathered at Queen's Park this morning, urging the Ford government to support Bill 8, which would provide 10 paid sick days and 14 additional days during public health emergencies.
Now, members of the other elected parties at Queen's Park attended today's rally in support of Bill 8, which will be voted on this week. So these healthcare workers are looking at progressive Conservative MPPs for their vote. To discuss their efforts today and over the past 21 months, we welcome to CP24 tonight Dina Ladd, Executive Director of the Workers' Action Centre, and Dr. Naheed Dosani, a member of the Decent Work and Health Network. We appreciate both of you making time for CP24 tonight. Dr. Dosani, it's been 21 months that you've been calling for this. How are you feeling this week as a vote on Bill 8 is expected and this rally was held today?
Yeah, it's important to remember that paid sick days are something that many of us were advocating for before COVID-19. But COVID-19 shined a real light on the importance of social policies like paid sick days and protecting health workers. We have to remember at the peak of the pandemic, in some regions like the region of Peel, 1 in 4 essential workers were going to work sick with COVID-19. And we had to fight tooth and nail here in Ontario for the Ontario government to step up with the policy that would keep workers safe. They ended up coming through with a policy of 3 days that expires on December 31st. And what we're calling for now is something that looks ahead to the future to protect workers. And that includes 10 paid sick days that are paid for workers and 14 additional days that help them during public health emergencies. The time is now if we really want to support workers. COVID is not over. We need to protect families and parents and children.
Dina, labor groups have been calling for this for a long time now. What do you think it will take to really move the needle here?
I mean, I think that what we've seen during the pandemic is thousands and thousands of workers affected by the lack of paid sick days. We saw huge outbreaks in workplaces. And I think, you know, what happened in long-term care speaks for itself, where we saw a lot of low-income, racialized women who do personal support work, dietary work, all the kinds of jobs that have been essential during our pandemic and have not been protected. In fact, this morning at the rally that we had Lily speak, and she works in a long-term care facility where over 30 residents died during the pandemic, and yet she still does not have permanent paid sick days. This is appalling. We have been talking about this issue. It's time, as Dr. Dosani says. You know, workers should be able to go home and be with their families and not be worried about getting sick and losing a day's pay. This is essential public policy.
It's also about mental health, right, Dina? I'm thinking about Lily working in a long-term care home and watching people die around her, and maybe she just needs a day off. She's not able to do that, right?
Yeah, I mean, we've had workers put in so many hours during the pandemic. We see healthcare workers struggling. We see workers in logistics and warehousing and food processing factories struggling with the added hardship of not having benefits, not having paid sick days, having a pandemic, and having no choice but to go to work. And so I think we have to remember that there are thousands and thousands of workers that could not stay home with their families during the pandemic. And now we're all expected to go to work. The COVID emergency benefits are all over, but the pandemic is not over. And so we need these essential protections. And it's that, you know, the decision is now in the Ford government's hands. They have the chance on Wednesday to make this a reality so that people like Lily don't have to get stressed out about going to work right now.
Dr. Dosani, I wonder if you can speak about the impact if this doesn't change, if we don't see these workers get more paid sick days. Do you think people in the industry will just choose to leave?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's an eventual possibility. We see cases are on the rise. We know that, respiratory illnesses, colds, and flus are a reality this winter. People are going to be inside more because it's winter. And we know that parents are going to need time off to get their kids vaccinated. So what we got brewing here is sort of a perfect storm that really points out why paid sick days are so important. People shouldn't have to choose between their health and paying their bills. And really, when you think about it, paid sick days should not be a partisan issue. This is a nonpartisan issue because every politician, every political leader should be worried about the well-being, health, and safety of our workforce. And that's why I'm hopeful that the Ontario government will come through. They still have time.
So you're looking for that political will, Dr. Dosani. What did you see at Queen's Park today?
Today, I was honored to join Dina and many others from different sectors, including health workers, nurses, personal support workers, but also education workers, retail workers, frontline workers, and representatives from the NDP party, the Liberal Party, and the Green Party. We didn't actually see anybody from the Conservative Party, unfortunately. We know that they've actually voted down paid sick days over 25 times to date. But we did see a collective call to improve the conditions that will support workers as we go into the winter months. 10 paid sick days. We still have time. There's a vote upcoming for Bill 8, and we're definitely hoping for the best.
Dr. Dosani, you mentioned how many times the PCs have voted against this. Do you think that there's any chance progress can be made?
As mentioned, paid sick days is a nonpartisan issue. And really, we saw all three parties come out to support this today. We saw a collective of people from different sectors who are workers on the front lines, who are thinking of a better future. And we know this government has put out statements, and really has put out, a marketing campaign that they're out there for workers. So if you're really out here for workers, then legislate 10 paid sick days. People shouldn't have to choose between their health and paying their bills.
Dina, Dr. Dosani pointed out that these efforts that you're making were pre-pandemic. They've become amplified during the pandemic. Can you give us an idea of what those conversations are like when you're working on this kind of advocacy and you're trying to help these frontline workers? What are the responses you get from elected officials?
Well, I mean, I think the thing is that, it depends which party the elected officials belong to. But I think that on a daily basis at the Workers' Centre, we run an emergency hotline, and we're constantly seeing the absolute stress and pressure and sickness that workers have developed during the pandemic and way before. And I think it's really important to remember that we actually had 2 paid sick days. We actually had, paid sick days in this province that were permanent and employer paid, but the Ford government took them away. And it took so much for us to persuade them to bring in these 3 temporary paid sick days. And as Dr. Dosani said, they expire in 6 weeks, yet our children have still not been vaccinated. We are starting to see cases increase, and all the signs are there that we need to make sure that people stay home when they get sick. And I think that that's all that we're asking for, is a public health measure that everybody from mayors to, politicians of different stripes, to healthcare workers, to faith leaders, to frontline workers, have just been asking for this essential protection. And I think that, Doug Ford is saying that they're working for workers. So if they are, they will vote yes for paid sick days. It's the right thing to do.
And speaking of voting, Dina, next year is an election year in the province. Do you think that will change what happens this week?
I think that Ontarians are going to be paying close attention to what the Ford government does this week. I think that they are incredibly concerned around paid sick days. We have over 80% of people who have been polled support this public health measure, and that's not just in Ontario but right across the country. And so I think that the Ford government better pay attention to what they do on Wednesday, because we certainly will be making sure that everybody knows how they voted. And we don't want it to be the 26th time they voted against paid sick days. And I'm sure they don't want to be seen as the government that did not protect workers as we entered into the flu season and into this next wave of case counts for COVID.
Okay. Dina Ladd, Dr. Naheed Dosani, we appreciate you both making time to speak about this tonight. Thank you.